So in a recent live stream, I got asked the question, what's going on with those tanks that you set up in the basement? Can we get an update on those? And so in today's video, we're going to be giving you an update on 4 tanks. So several months ago, we were building out the basement, the fish room, having to do with all the grow out tanks, and as well as I was setting up some show tanks before this kind of room came together and was even an idea. Downstairs was kind of going to be the main focus spot, but then as we grew, I started to realize that we really needed a designated space to be able to film, have a nice backdrop, and really have some nice tanks to showcase. But in the meantime, we were setting up some tanks down in the basement to kind of fill that need, but kind of not in the way that I wanted to. We are having some success downstairs, so let's take a look. So first up, we got the 60U tank. Now, the 60U tank does not have any sort of livestock in it at the moment. It's really just about the plants and the scape. But if you haven't seen the setup video to this tank, I'll make sure I link it above. This tank was originally done by Alex and Kevin of Brooklyn Hardscapes. They kind of did all the hardscape position and rocks, and we went in and planted it afterwards. Now, the plants grew in fantastically. They were almost growing in a little too well. Things have just gotten overgrown and it looked like an insane jungle almost. So we really needed to cut it back to really make the scape look what it did in the beginning stages of all the plants growing out, but it's still not growing out. There's still room for plants to kind of carpet out as far as the Monte Carlo goes that I wanted to do, and the Rotala and the Hydro that we have in here, as well as the red Downoi, which actually is still alive despite it being kind of shadowed by the other plants. So first things first, I went in and I started trimming back all the Monte Carlo that was overgrowing. It was all over the place. It just was being unruly. I've never seen Monte Carlo grow so fast and so thick. So I started cutting out a large portion of the Monte Carlo just to get rid of the bulk of it, because it kind of just bridged the gap between the two major stones in the scape all by itself. I have no idea really kind of how it did it, but it just kind of bridged the gap, made this giant bundle of Monte Carlo. So we cut all that back. I then trimmed a ton of plants down. So then I trimmed a bunch of the Monte Carlo that was all over the place in other spots down to just kind of get it to be a little bit thicker of a carpet and kind of tighten it up a bit, as well as to kind of thin it out, because if you don't thin out a carpet or any kind of plant that grows like Monte Carlo does, you're going to wind up getting dead spots, which we actually had some dead spots under it. So we wound up trimming down as much as I could without taking too much off and allowing the stems to really bounce back and look really nice in the future. The trimming is going to help with that. I then proceeded to trim the Rotella Walichi, and I just went through and gave it a giant cut across the middle, and then I replanted several of the tops, many of which I actually couldn't put back because there just wasn't enough room. The plant grew tremendously long, and there just wasn't a whole lot of room to really place any more, so I had a bunch that I wasn't able to put back. And actually, same thing with the Hydro Aragoya. That just overgrew and was insane, so I had to trim a bunch of that back as well, and most of the stems I couldn't put back. So I did, however, trim the red Downoi that was left over, and that's pretty much doing really well. I trimmed what I could off of that and replanted that as well, and it's looking great. The scape overall is looking very nice now that it's all trimmed up and looking pretty good. All in all, I have to say I'm really happy with the scape the way it turned out. If I'm going to add anything to this tank as far as livestock yet, I just have been all over the place and really haven't had time to focus on that decision, so I don't want to just put something in there that I may not necessarily want long term, because I don't want to have to remove it and either give it away or find a different tank for it or whatever it is. I really want to get something that I want long term in this tank. So I don't know, if you guys have suggestions, leave them down in the comments below and I'll look through them and maybe give me an idea of something to go research. I kind of want to do something not normal in the tank, but I don't know at this point. Next up, we're going to take a look at the $700 blue shrimp or blue bolt shrimp tank. This is a Fluval Flex tank. If you didn't see the setup video of this, I'll link it above as well. But this tank is one of my favorites nonstop. I always come over here, I look at it, I'm like examining the shrimp. And I have to say, we've had tons of babies, guys. We are shrimp parents. We have tons of them all around. There is just so many of them. It's hard to even see some of them because they're so significantly tiny, like juveniles and fry, that there's so many tiny baby shrimp that it's awesome. I'm so happy about it. Jake actually was supposed to take, and if you don't know who Jake is, he works for me. He was supposed to take actually half of the blue bolts from the initial shipment, but he just hasn't had his tank fully set up yet to do so. I think he's going to be taking them in the next week or so. So we've had just an explosion of growth because we have 47 blue bolt shrimps in there to begin with, and I don't think we lost any from the initial stocking. And I really don't know how many are in there at the moment because they've had so many babies, it's really just too much to count. So if I had to guess, we probably have over 100 in there currently. currently. And the tank was long overdue for some maintenance. Now, both on this tank and the other tank, we really haven't done much to it. And this tank, we've really done nothing but just top off. We haven't done any maintenance to it. I haven't gone through and did water changes, and the shrimp have just thrived. All we've really added is various amounts of foods, and that's about it. I did add a couple different plants just because I wanted to see how they grew in this tank, because if you didn't know, blue bolts are Carnivorous shrimp, and they require a low TDS, so we have to use RO water and remineralize it. So this water is a lot lower TDS than the rest of the water here. So I really wanted to see how a couple different plants grew in this type of water. So I went through and I kind of trimmed it back, the giant hair grass, but the way I trimmed it back is just by kind of tearing it with my hands. Because the giant hair grass, you don't really want to snip it along its top, although you could do that. I don't like doing that because it does damage some leaves and may result in losing some of the plant. What I like to do is go through and thin it out with my hands, and then I just replant everything that I thinned out, because all those strands are typically new plants that will grow roots and re-root into the substrate. So I just kind of planted them all over the place and kind of really just filled out the giant hair grass. But that's really about it. The shrimp tank, they're doing fantastic. They're eating well. I've had no problems, no really algae issues, really nothing. The tank is self-sustaining and I do nothing to it. So it's a fantastic little setup that I get to admire and not have to worry about. The next tank we're going to be talking about is the shell dweller tank. Now this tank, there really isn't much to really update as far as maintenance wise. We don't have to trim this, there really isn't any plants. Most of the moss that I tried growing in here didn't do well, but this little patch of dwarf sedge has somehow stayed alive despite being buried. But what did wind up happening is we did get babies, and the babies have actually grown up a bit. We actually have young juvenile babies of the shell dwellers now. They're past the fry stage where they're kind of just not able to swim all that well, where they kind of just rest on the substrate, and now they're actually swimming around and interacting with the other fish. Albeit they're really small, they will eventually get bigger. So because of all their fry, pretty soon we're gonna probably have to get a bigger tank, because they're gonna outgrow this tank very, very soon. So we're gonna have to probably look into using a tank that I have from our shed, and I have an idea of what I wanna do, but I just have to find the time to do so. So last but not least is the Nano Carnivorous pond that we did. Now I do have to say I kind of drained a lot of the water out of the base of the pond to just allow me to just keep it moist enough for the UG to grow, and it really hasn't grown a whole lot. It's growing, but really slowly. The giant sundew actually got a lot more compact. I'm figuring it's the light, because it has so much light now it's making more compact leaves, so it's not nearly as big as it was, and it's still catching bugs. Every day I see new bugs trapped on there, so it's still doing its job. Right now its leaves are really small though, so it's not as big as it once was. The two bladderworts that we put in there to kind of carpet out along the rocks are carpeting out. They're just taking a very long time, but that's to kind of be expected with this plant. I'm in no really rush to have it carpet out, so it's just great that it's doing well. And then last but not least, the Pygmy Sun Dudes are doing absolutely fantastic. They're bright and vibrant and looking awesome, and I really have to say I really like them. So it's actually a nice little thing. We water it and I turn on the light when I remember, so these guys sometimes go without light for like a day and they're still alive. So I've been trying to work on putting them on a timer, because that would actually be better for them, but I just haven't had the moment to get down there and do so. And guys, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed or want to know anything else about the tanks, make sure you leave it in the comments below. I'll try and answer some questions in a future video if you have anything having to do with any of the 4 tanks I showed you here today. So if you guys want to help support these videos, you can head on over to our website, h2oplants.com, and you can pick up plants for your tank. If you're new here, you can click the round button to subscribe. And if you want to check out how we set up the paludarium over here, you can click up top. And if you want to check out how we set up the desert tank, you can click down there. Guys, I will see you next time.